The following is part two of my conversation with Professor Stephen Wirls. We talked about the importance of writing, his favorite books, as well as the influence they've had in his life. But most importantly, we addressed what he believes to be the biggest question in philosophy: who is God? So without further ado, my name is Kelton Giovanni Masiga, and this is the Octagon of Reason. Earlier today, earlier in the conversation, you said that as much as you're guiding people, to understand more of life, to understand more of the world, you're also not trying to destroy, the things that they hold most dear, right? But I believe that if there's one thing you're actually willing to destroy, is your students' writing. You are an absolutely harsh grader, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the website Rate My Professor, right? I don't know if you ever, you're not.
I know.
Oh, you know about it. Have you ever like searched yourself there? No.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So yeah. In preparation for this conversation, I went on the website and I looked up Professor Stephen Wirls, and mostly positive comments, but almost all of them, all the way to 2003, they talk about how harsh you are when it comes to grading students' papers. I'm gonna read some of the comments to you right here. His writing's expectations can be confusing, but office hours are helpful. Not all an easy A, but I highly recommend no matter what you major in. Absolutely adore this man. He's so caring. Beginning of the semester, you will dislike him because he tears your writing apart, but then he'll rebuild it and you'll love him, right? And I think this is by far my favorite one, right? He says, grading is hard and this class is a lot of work. However, it will make you a much better writer. What is the thing about writing? What is it about writing that most people don't seem to understand, but you do? Why you put so much emphasis when it comes to writing?
Well, in general, I'll take this in layers. Communicating clearly is closely related to thinking clearly and reasoning. So a lot of what I push is careful analytical writing, logical, must be evidence. There's also something quite beautiful about writing, and I would like students to appreciate the sort of satisfaction in writing a good sentence or writing a good essay, but it's also in a very practical way. The world works a lot on writing. It's a primary form of communication, even in emails and things. And writing good prose, both people enjoy reading it, they think highly of you if you can. That's always a good thing in the world. It can open doors. So there's a kind of both, sort of a concern that people appreciate the language and using it well, that can be both pleasing and effective in the sense that people will understand what you're trying to say. Yes, I think I'm an okay writer. But I can teach people, I can teach people to be better writers. But what I've learned over the years is what you need to do is just get them to work on it. And it's not like I can teach people to write, but I can, I think, lead them to see that they have that capacity. And they will only see it if they're desperate. And the only way I can get them to be desperate is to be a hard grader, and give them a bar, okay, so show me the way up. In my work, I try to do that. Here's what you can do better. And, I would say that the large majority of students I've had have done that. They've made progress. That's all I can ask. Gotten better to be better writers. And I think they see that. They see,
Mhm.
and it is pleasurable. It's
Mhm.
pleasant to, sort of look back at something and say, that's pretty good.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of work, but that's okay because I think, it's something I can pass on to students other than, teaching them to be wise. I can
Mhm.
teach them to write well. So,
You said you try to show them a bar, right? If I'm trying to be a better basketball player, my bar is probably LeBron James or Michael Jordan, or have some sort of reference. So when it comes to writing, what is that bar? What is that reference that you present your students with, and you stimulate them to try to reach as close as they can to that bar?
well, the bar I can't pick a person.
Mhm.
I have people I admire and I can't say emulate, but I certainly can't imitate them. Maybe I do emulate them, even though it's embarrassing how far away I am. Um, you know, I like David Hume. I think what makes him so fascinating is that his, he's quite clear and dense. So it's not like reading Hegel, who's neither clear, is not clear and is very dense, but you can't get to the density. It's so difficult. Hume has a kind of ease in his prose, and so one enters into that, into his ideas without struggling through the language, the abstract language. He's good. Um, there are lots of people, I guess, and not famous people, but people who write essays for various magazines and stuff.
Mhm.
David Brooks writes, he writes for the New York Times. He's a good writer. And someone who, you could model yourself after. Again, clear prose, logical, sort of reasoning his way through. So, that's, I use models, but I've gotten good enough that I am now, pretty severe critic of my own writing. I hate it. Let me just, I, I don't, I struggle to write well. I always think it's never quite good enough. Sometimes editors say you got to submit it, and so I submit it, um, but I can. This will reveal something. I'm pretty sure this is true. I have never I've never reread anything that I've published
Okay.
because I'm terrified of doing it.
Oh wow. So
Because
so
I'll
this
think, oh, this is horrid. Why I don't want anyone to see this. But no, I don't think I've ever gone back and reread anything. So it's just me. It's my strange brain and lack of
I,
self-confidence and that kind of stuff. So
I don't know if you remember this, but around this time last year, I sent you an email and I asked you to list all the possible books you think a college student should read. I don't know if you remember this. And I said, I'm thinking college is about 4 years. Maybe he's going to send me a list of like maybe 15 books at max. And then had this list of 35 books or so. And you said at the end, you need to have you should have all of these read by the time you hit the age of 50, right? One of the books you had there were Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, Plato's Republic, Aristotle's Ethics, St. Thomas Treatise on Law. We had Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, Machiavelli's Prince, Locke's Second Treatise of Government, and they also had Letter Concerning Toleration and so many other books, right? Out of all these books, they don't have to necessarily be a part of that list. What do you think What's that one book, maybe two books that influenced your worldview when you were around my age? Tough question. I know. I know.
Yeah, I mean well, there's sort of I guess I'll give you a strange answer. I mean, in college, probably the book that affected me the most was Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Um, uh, it's an exhilarating book. It's also somewhat terrifying, given that he destroys everything that you might believe in. And that's, that, so I'll just deal in terms of sort of the ones that had the, sort of the huge effect on me at that point. I mean, you limit my answer to your age, Kelton. So
I had to.
But I'll extend it out a little bit. But the other books, I mean, there are a lot of other books. I mean, Plato's Republic, but Melville's Billy Budd, that was not on my list probably, but
no, it was not.
That had a big effect on me. Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Didn't read the whole thing, but read parts of it. That had a big effect on me. In graduate school, not a lot of things. I don't want to describe graduate school. I already sort of did. It was not the best of times for me. But Aristotle's Ethics had a huge effect on me personally, not just intellectually, personally.
Why is that, if I may ask?
Well, I mean, it solved a problem for me in a way that sort of the good, bad, right, wrong, how should I live my life? And there was something about his understanding, I was always wanted the truth. Aristotle, his focus is on character, being virtuous. And that idea of acquiring good characteristics that humans are capable of, difficult ones, courage, wisdom, justice, maybe the hardest one, prudence, moderation, that seemed to me the right way to approach, ethics, was by and so it kind of relieved me of the sort of metaphysical question. I didn't need to know the ultimate truth. All I needed to know was what is required to be a good citizen and a good person. And it doesn't matter whether there's some affirmation in the higher order of things. We can understand moderation. It's nothing abstract about it. We know from our experiences that we do things to excess. We know, and so we can know how to do things in a more moderate way. It doesn't take science, it doesn't take metaphysics, it just takes observing yourself and trying to be better, to be more honest, to be, all those sort of qualities of character. And that in that way, Aristotle had a huge effect on me. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, that was a phenomenal experience in my life. I read it in 2 days while I was in between classes and didn't sleep very much. Dostoevsky, another huge, philosophy and political philosophy are in the realm of reason. And, reason is the coin of the realm, rational life. That's what a good human being does, lead a rational life. Dostoevsky kind of blew that up, not because we shouldn't be rational, but that the human being is far more complicated than being a rational being. and there's a certain degree of respect and honor that should be given to the less rational sides of us, you know. And he's a wonderful writer. I mean, I would say that he and Shakespeare are the two who, you know, still stand out in my mind as having a big influence on me. So
one thing I'm noticing, you're using a lot of to describe, you know, how this book's affected you. They taught you how to be a better human being, how to be a good citizen, right? So one could fairly ask, what exactly do you mean by good? And before you answer that, at the beginning of the conversation, you talked about how vicious human beings can be, right? So, and that's something that the way you describe it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be a part of human nature, right? That, you know, that one could say that evil, you know, that we see in the world seems to be embedded, you know, in human nature. Now you're talking about, you know, trying to be a good person, a better person. So there seems to be a conflict there, right? How can a vicious human being, first of all, know what good is and then act on it? So how do you go about that?
I mean, we are capable human beings of, you know, again, capable of viciousness,
Mhm.
but we are also capable of just astonishing goodness. Again, you know, we can love other people. That's a pretty amazing thing to me, you know, that you can be, you know, just basically you can lose yourself in another person. That never really happens, but you can be so close and so caring and so involved in somebody else's life, that you know, you don't give up your own life because that's important to the love relationship, but the boundaries sort of get blurred in a beautiful way. And, you know, parents taking care of children, people helping each other out. This is just an aside, but it gets to your point. You know, I can't remember which hurricane it was that hit Houston and flooded Houston. And there was this, you know, these people who didn't know anyone in Houston, had no, you know, relationships to them at all, got in their hunting boats and stuff and just ran up the bayous or whatever from Louisiana just to help other human beings. It was just kind of beautiful in that way. So yes, vicious, but also beautiful. There's a book on the Gettysburg called Killer Angels that kind of wraps it up. And, you know, it's a beautiful novel. But I think if we look at human beings in their context, and so, you know, that we know what we're capable of, we won't necessarily live up to it, but we know when we've harmed other people generally. I mean, again, the vicious, we can't do necessarily something about that, but we know we're selfish. We know we can harm others. We know we've lashed out. So you know, we can learn just from simple experience how we can be better, in the sense like just pick moderation. You know, you work on, you know, taming your passions, your urges, your desires, because you're perfectly aware that they will lead one possibly to harm yourself, but also to harm others. It doesn't, you don't have to understand what justice is precisely, metaphysically, you know, the just in itself, but it doesn't take much to know, you know, that treating someone in a fair manner, in a kind of impartial manner, requires self-restraint, especially if if you're involved, you will tend to favor yourself. Like think more intent. But it doesn't take that much to realize that that isn't being just. It isn't being fair. So, honesty, honor, that's a little different. So I'll step a little bit further into the question, Kelton, but you have to have a sense of, I think, dignity, sort of what human beings can be, not what they are to begin with, but a sense of sort of what Aristotle would call, at least in translation, nobility, a kind of sense that human beings can rise above their basic impulses. And as a consequence, that we can make ourselves into better people. And Aristotle was sort of the guide to how, what should I be looking at? What should I be thinking about in making myself a better person? It's, let me just say, Kelton, it's a work in progress. Mm-hmm. I'm getting old, but, I still have to work on it, but it's, it's like a checking myself, when I have a kind of passion, could be anger or something, not that I give up my anger, but I check it. So, am I being just? Is it reasonable for me to be angry? I know that's weird, but, we do. And so there isn't that sense. This is why I liked Aristotle. I think began here is that it doesn't require knowing the good. It requires knowing that you have the capacity to be better in the things that you want to be better in. Most people want to be fair in some way, but you have to bring yourself to seek that.
I wanna pause on that for a second here, because I find it very interesting how, Aristotle says that you don't necessarily have to know the good. However, you still have to act in goodness, right? And I kind of want to bring back the metaphysical question here, as much as you said that Aristotle, sort of eliminated that for you. And the reason why I'm bringing it back is because when you look at, I'm a Christian, right? When you look at Christianity, you see that they pretty much Christianity presents the problem, the condition of the human heart, pretty much the same way you just did. But the difference is that Christ goes a little bit further to say that the reason why that happens is because of the human sin, right? And I find that to be more consistent because, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, and I find that to be more consistent because it is one thing to know that you're selfish, right? But we not only know that we're selfish, we know that being selfish is not necessarily a good thing, right? And we aim to go against that selfish nature, right? So when you look at that through the lenses of Christ, you say, oh, okay, so this is what you meant, right? So naturally, because of our sin, we are broken, right? But because the Bible says that we were created in the image of God, so our nature still has a memory of how we ought to be, right? And I remember what we once talked. I once asked you if you were, a Christian or you adhere to a religion, and you said no, right? But in the list of books you had, the New Testament was there, and as well as the Old Testament was there. So now I'm curious, having the knowledge of, the gospel, to put it that way, the knowledge of the gospel. And in my view, what you said seems to be very consistent with it. But, there's just that last step that it seems to me that you're not willing to take. How do you assess all of that? What is it? What is it about the gospel? What is it about Christianity that seems to be in line with your worldview, right? But you're just not willing to take that last step. Why is that? What's going on here?
Well, I mean, whoa, this is personal, Kelton.
That's the purpose of the Octagon of Reason. We're trying to, as you said, we're trying to get to the truth. We're trying to get to the truth. So that's why I'm asking these questions.
I'll half dodge the question and half answer it. But
Okay.
I mean, this goes back to how I was growing up. I mean, my father was militantly anti-religious, so that was sort of dominated my early life. And over the years, I, can't give a chronology. I've changed in the sense that I've come to appreciate the question more. That there isn't, my father was just definitive. There is no God, he also thought religions were bad for the world. But the most important question is that I take, the most important change is that I take the question of the existence of God very seriously now, that I didn't before. And I understand that there is a kind of gulf between, which Aquinas talks about, between philosophy and faith. And the world of philosophy keeps me in a kind of, I guess the best way to put it is a kind of state of suspension, in the sense that I, again, this is maybe the most important question that philosophers can think about is the existence of God. And because it has, the answer to that question has a big, the consequence of an answer to that question is huge for moral philosophy, political philosophy, all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But, where I feel I am now is take the question seriously. But I have not answered it intellectually, and I have not had what I would call, to put it in the most personal sense, I have not had what might be called a conversion experience. I have not felt what I would think, what I could judge to be the presence of God in my life. So in a way, there's been nothing yet to shove me over the line. So I'm in what Kierkegaard calls the world of mediation, thinking about it. And that's sort of where I'm stuck.
So you are at a state where, and how can I phrase this in the best way? Are you saying that you're waiting for some sort of revelation from the heavens? I'm trying to understand, because it seems to me that you have obviously explored, this question and the answers that they were presented to us so many times, and you still do, right? But you're waiting for something. You're waiting for something. Just no pun intended, make that leap of faith, right?
That is what I'm.
What is that thing? What is that thing that you think that the answers that you were presented with do not show that last step? What is that thing that you think you're waiting for?
Well, I don't know what I'm waiting for, since I've never experienced it. But I think that there are at least respectable arguments from philosophers about the existence of God. Mm-hmm. Respectable arguments against that. Not arguments against the existence of God so much as arguments that reason can't tell us much about God. And even Aquinas acknowledges that. Reason might be able to tell us that God exists, but it can't tell us anything more and can't tell us anything about the things we really care about, which are, sort of what's the right way to live? Do I have an immortal soul? What happens to my soul after I die? All of those things, Aquinas recognizes those can't be addressed by philosophy. And so he he says to get over to the sort of existence, beyond the existence of God, to what he calls the essence of God, requires faith. Just a belief in the truth of your God, whether it's Yahweh, Allah, Jesus as the Son of God. I mean, whichever one that Aquinas said, that requires something that steps beyond reason. So all I can say is that step has not been made. I'm not sure how one makes it. But I'm on the reason side, not as rejecting the truth of God, but in not knowing the truth of God. So, and that's pretty much about as far as I'll go, Kelton, but go ahead.
I'm just something inside of me that's just trying to, there's just this urge to ask you more questions on this one. But, you know what? If you promise me that you'll take a round 2 on the Octagon of Reason, I will save my last question. How does that sound?
Okay, that sounds good.
Sounds great. Fantastic.
Yeah. All right.
So just close remarks. Thank you once again for accepting to do this interview. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. I've learned a lot from you, and I hope to continue to learn more, because you are this, this being with so much knowledge, and I just always nice to absorb as much as I can from you. That's really for me. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I mean, I enjoy talking to you, Kelton, too. So thank you for having me on. I was very honored to be asked. So
thank you so much, sir. So this was the Octagon of Reason, episode 1. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Take care.